The medical bay was cold and white. Bright lights made everything look sharper, clearer. Jae-hoon sat on the edge of a white bed, his small body looking even smaller against the sterile background. The doctor spoke in hushed tones, their words careful and measured. "Sole survivor," one doctor whispered to another. "Remarkable." Jae-hoon understood more than they realized. The scar on his face hurt, but not as much as the memory of that day. His parents were gone. The research station was destroyed. And he was alone. United Earth Expeditionary Force personnel moved around him like shadows. Their uniforms were crisp, their faces serious. Captain Kang, a tall woman with sharp eyes, watched Jae-hoon carefully. She saw something in the boy, something most people would miss. "What do you remember?" she asked him one day. Jae-hoon looked up. His eyes were different now. No longer the eyes of a child who played with toy spaceships and dreamed of adventures. These were the eyes of someone who had seen something impossible. "It was faster than anything," he said quietly. "It knew exactly where to strike." Captain Kang made a note on her digital pad. Most children would have been traumatized into silence, but Jae-hoon was different. He remembered details, colors, movements, the way the alien had moved between rock formations. Weeks passed, months of interviews, medical tests, psychological evaluations. The United Earth military saw potential where others saw a traumatized child. They had a special program, a training ground for survivors of extreme alien encounters, children who had experienced things no human should see, children who could become something more. Jae-hoon was transferred to a secure training facility on Mars. The facility looked like a normal school from the outside, but nothing about it was normal. Here, children learned things most adults would never understand: xenobiology, advanced combat tactics, communication strategies for species that didn't use words. The curriculum was designed to transform survivors into something more than soldiers. They were to be humanity's first line of defense against unknown threats. Jae-hoon excelled. Where other children struggled, he adapted. The scar on his face was a constant reminder of what he had lost, but it also drove him forward. Each training exercise was a chance to understand, to prepare, to become stronger. Combat simulations became his playground. He learned to move like the alien he had encountered, to think beyond human limitations. The instructors were both impressed and slightly afraid of how quickly he learned. "He processes information differently," one instructor noted during a strategy meeting. "It's like he's been touched by something beyond our understanding." By age 14, Jae-hoon could speak 3 alien languages. He could predict movement patterns of multiple species. His mental mapping skills were off the charts. The military had transformed a traumatized child into a weapon of understanding. But Jae-hoon never forgot why he was here. The memory of that day on Novus Prime burned inside him. The alien that killed his parents. The scar that marked him forever. Revenge. No, something more complex. Understanding. In the vast training halls of the Mars facility, Jae-hoon Park was becoming something new. Not just a survivor, not just a soldier, but a bridge between humanity and the unknown dangers that waited in the darkness of space. And somewhere, far away, something was watching, waiting to see what this marked child would become. The conference room was silent. Lieutenant Jae-hoon Park stood at the center, his presentation projected behind him. Military leaders from across Earth's defense forces watched carefully. This was not an ordinary briefing. At 32, Jae-hoon had become something of a legend within the United Earth military. The scar on his face, a constant reminder of his past, now seemed like a badge of honor. His unique approach to alien encounters had saved countless lives and prevented multiple interstellar conflicts. "Communication is our primary weapon," Jae-hoon explained, his voice steady and clear. "Understanding is more powerful than any weapon we can build." The holographic display showed complex interaction patterns between human and alien communication systems. Where most saw chaos, Jae-hoon saw opportunity. His breakthrough protocols had changed how humanity approached first contact scenarios. His journey had not been easy. Years of specialized training had transformed the scared child from Novus Prime into a strategic mastermind. He understood aliens in a way no other human could. It wasn't just about military tactics. It was about understanding psychology, culture, and the deeper motivations behind conflict. During the Centauri incident, Jae-hoon had prevented a war that could have destroyed 3 different alien civilizations. Instead of military force, he had used a complex communication strategy that highlighted mutual benefits and shared challenges. Lieutenant Park is our most valuable asset, General Rodriguez had said in a classified report. He doesn't just fight. He prevents fights from happening. His methods were unconventional. While other military strategists prepared for war, Jae-hoon prepared for understanding. He had learned multiple alien languages. He studied cultural practices. He looked for connections where others saw only differences. The Mars training facility had been more than a school. It had been a forge, creating something new. Jae-hoon was proof that humanity's greatest strength was not its weapons, but its ability to adapt and understand. His latest mission was his most challenging yet. The Krulshi, the same alien species responsible for the attack on his childhood colony, were becoming increasingly aggressive. Diplomatic tensions were rising. Most military leaders wanted a show of force. Jae-hoon had a different plan. "We need to understand their motivation," he told the military council. "Every aggressive action has a reason. We just haven't discovered it yet." Some called him idealistic. Others called him dangerous. But no one could argue with his results. Missions that would have ended in bloodshed were now resolved through careful negotiation. Species that had been enemies for generations were finding common ground. And at the center of it all was Jae-hoon Park, the boy who had survived, who had learned, who had transformed. The scar on his face was more than a memory now. It was a symbol of humanity's potential, a reminder that understanding could be more powerful than conflict. As the presentation ended, the military leaders exchanged glances. They knew they were witnessing something extraordinary. Lieutenant Jae-hoon Park was not just a soldier. He was a bridge between worlds. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, something was watching, waiting to see what he would do next. The secure data room was silent except for the soft hum of advanced computer systems. Lieutenant Jae-hoon Park leaned forward, his eyes fixed on a series of encrypted data fragments that made no sense to anyone else. His fingers moved quickly across the holographic interface, connecting seemingly random pieces of information. Something was wrong, and Jae-hoon knew it. The mission had seemed routine, a standard intelligence gathering operation near the outer rim of human-controlled space. But the data he had uncovered suggested something far more complicated than a simple reconnaissance mission. Encrypted files told a story that didn't make sense. Fragments of communication, partial mission logs, pieces of a puzzle that hinted at a much larger plan. The attack on his childhood colony, the moment that had defined his entire life, might not have been a random encounter after all. Jae-hoon worked carefully. Each piece of data was examined, cross-referenced, analyzed. His unique training allowed him to see connections that others would miss. Where most analysts would see chaos, he saw a pattern emerging. "Computer," he spoke quietly, "run advanced correlation analysis on these data fragments." The AI system responded instantly. Holographic displays shifted, showing complex relationship maps. Lines connected seemingly unrelated pieces of information. A story began to take shape. The Krulshi, the alien species responsible for the attack on Novus Prime, had been planning something for years, decades even. The attack on his colony was more than just a random encounter. It was a test, a carefully planned investigation. But a test for what? Jae-hoon's mind raced. His fingers moved across the interface, pulling more information. Years of training had turned him into something more than just an intelligence officer. He was a hunter of truths, someone who could see beyond the obvious. The data suggested a systematic study of human resilience, Not just military strength, but psychological adaptability. His own survival had been anticipated, tracked, possibly even encouraged. A chill ran down his spine. The classified files showed a pattern of similar encounters across multiple human colonies. Each attack seemed random, but they were anything but random. They were carefully selected, calculated. Someone, or something, had been watching humanity, studying them, testing their limits. Jae-hoon knew he couldn't share this information through normal channels. The implications were too significant, too dangerous. If the wrong people learned what he had discovered, it could cause panic, or worse. He created a secure data packet, encrypted multiple times, hidden in a system that would only be accessed under specific conditions. A fail-safe, a message to his future self. Something was coming, something big, and Jae-hoon Park was the only one who had begun to understand its true nature. As the last encryption sequence completed, a single message flashed briefly on the screen. Greater than SUBGCT observation. Phase 1 Siombility. Then it was gone. Outside the secure data room, the universe continued its silent dance. Stars burned, planets turned, and somewhere in the vast darkness, something was watching, waiting. The game was just beginning. The diplomatic shuttle hung in space like a delicate glass sculpture. Stars stretched across the viewport, silent and endless. Inside, Lieutenant Jae-hoon Park stood absolutely still, his hands clasped behind his back. This was not a typical diplomatic mission. The conference room was designed for neutral meetings between different species. White walls, circular table, chairs that could adjust to multiple body types. Everything was carefully planned to reduce tension. Then she entered. Anna moved with a grace that defied human understanding. Her body seemed to shift between solid and liquid, a characteristic of the Kralshi species. Multiple eyes, some biological, some technological, scanned the room with precise calculation. Their eyes met. For a moment, time stopped. Jae-hoon saw the recognition first, a subtle change in Anna's body language. The way her multiple limbs shifted, the slight adjustment of her sensory organs. She remembered him, the child from Novus Prime. The scar on Jae-hoon's face burned with the memory of that day. Lieutenant Park, Anna spoke, her translator producing a crisp, almost musical human language. We meet again. The words were simple, but they carried decades of history, of violence, of survival, of something more complex than simple conflict. Jae-hoon's training kicked in. Years of diplomatic preparation, years of learning to control his emotions, but underneath, something primal stirred. The memory of a child who had lost everything. You remember, he said. It was not a question. Anna's response was immediate. We do not forget, especially not subjects of significant interest. The diplomatic mission was officially about trade agreements, resource sharing, preventing potential conflicts between human and Kralshi territories. But both of them knew the real purpose. This was about understanding. The attack on Novus Prime, Jae-hoon began, was not random. No, Anna agreed. It was a carefully constructed evaluation. Each word was a weapon, each sentence a potential trigger for conflict. But they were beyond simple violence now. They were two intelligent beings trying to understand each other. Anna moved closer, her multiple limbs folded in a gesture of partial vulnerability, a Kralshi sign of potential communication. Jae-hoon recognized it immediately. Years of xenological study had prepared him for this moment. You survived, she said. That was unexpected. Jae-hoon's hand unconsciously touched the scar. Many things are unexpected. The diplomatic records would later show a standard meeting, resource discussions, potential collaboration points. But the real conversation happened in the spaces between words. In the memories they both carried. A child marked by violence. An alien who had been part of that violence. Now facing each other as representatives of their respective species. Outside, The stars continued their silent dance. Planets turned. Civilizations rose and fell. And here, in this small room, two beings who should have been enemies were finding something else. Understanding. The mission was just beginning. The secure meeting room was silent except for the soft hum of advanced communication systems. Lieutenant Jae-hoon Park sat across from Kor Anna, two beings connected by a history most would never understand. Our encounter was not an accident, Kor Anna began. Her translator produced words that were both precise and weighted with meaning. It was a carefully designed experiment. Jae-hoon leaned forward. Years of training had prepared him for this moment, but nothing could have truly prepared him for the truth that was about to unfold. The Krelshi, Kor Anna explained, had been studying human potential for generations, not through traditional methods of observation, but through direct intervention. The attack on Novus Prime was a calculated test of human resilience, psychological adaptability, and survival instinct. "You are a subject of significant interest," she said. Each word peeled back another layer of a complex historical narrative. The scar on Jae-hoon's face was more than a physical mark. It was a data point in a massive, decades-long study. The Krelshi had identified specific human colonies. Each attack was carefully planned, each encounter meticulously recorded. They were not looking to destroy humanity. They were trying to understand it. "Why?" Jae-hoon asked. The question was simple. The answer would be anything but. Kor Anna's multiple sensory organs shifted, a sign of complex emotional processing the humans would never fully comprehend. "Survival," she explained. "In a universe of competing species, understanding is the most powerful weapon." The experiment had multiple layers. They wanted to see how humans would respond to extreme stress, how individuals would adapt, how societies would rebuild. Jae-hoon's survival was not just a coincidence. It was a key data point. His parents' research station had been selected specifically. Their work in xenobiology made them perfect subjects for the first stage of the study. The attack was designed to be just precise enough to cause maximum psychological impact without complete destruction. "You marked me," Jae-hoon said, touching the scar, as a scientist would mark a specimen. Kor Anna did not deny it. The moral complexity was staggering. What seemed like a violent attack was actually a sophisticated research project. The Krelshi had been collecting data for decades, tracking survivors, studying their development, understanding how humans process trauma and transform it into strength. Jae-hoon's entire life, his military training, his diplomatic career, his unique approach to alien interactions, was part of their ongoing research. "And now?" he asked. The question hung in the air, heavy with possibility. Kor Anna's response was unexpected. "Now we talk. Now we understand." The universe outside continued its silent rotation. Planets turned. Stars burned. And here, in this small room, two beings from different worlds were breaking down the barriers of understanding. The experiment was far from over. It was just entering its most critical phase. The holographic display showed a map of the known galaxy. Red and blue sectors flickered with tension, representing the growing conflict between human and Krelshi territories. Lieutenant Jae-hoon Park stood at the center of the United Earth Strategic Command Center, his presence both a calming and electrifying force. War was coming. Everyone could feel it. Diplomatic channels had broken down. Years of careful negotiation were crumbling like ancient stone walls. Multiple alien species were choosing sides. The galaxy was preparing for a conflict that could reshape everything. Most military leaders wanted total war, complete destruction of the Krelshi civilization, revenge for countless lost colonies and destroyed outposts. But Jae-hoon saw something different. He saw a complex system on the brink of total collapse. "We're missing something," he told the assembled military council. "This conflict is not what it appears to be." His connection with Kor Anna had revealed layers of complexity that most humans could not understand. The Krelshi were not simply an aggressive species. They were survivors. Researchers, beings trying to understand the universe through the most direct methods possible. The first major battles began in the Orion spiral arm. Human battleships clashed with Kralshi adaptive vessels, technology that seemed to change and respond in ways that defied traditional combat strategies. Where human weapons expected solid targets, Kralshi ships became fluid. Where human tactics relied on predictable movements, Kralshi forces transformed mid-battle. Jae-hoon worked frantically. Communication was his weapon now. He used every piece of knowledge gained from years of study, every insight from his childhood encounter, every detail shared by Korana. The conflict was spreading. Neutral species were being forced to choose sides. Some joined the human alliance, others aligned with the Kralshi. The galaxy was dividing into two massive power blocks, each believing they fought for survival. But Jae-hoon knew the truth was more complicated. This was not just a war of weapons. It was a war of understanding, of perspective, of fundamental differences in how intelligent life viewed its place in the universe. His reports to the military command became increasingly urgent. He was no longer just presenting strategic information. He was trying to prevent a total galactic war that could destroy multiple civilizations. The Kralshi are not trying to destroy us, he explained in a classified briefing. They are trying to understand us, to study us. Their entire approach to interaction is based on research, not conquest. Most military leaders dismissed him. Some called him a traitor. Others suggested he had been compromised during his interactions with Korana. But Jae-hoon continued. His unique position, marked by the scar from childhood, trained in multiple disciplines, with unprecedented insights into alien psychology, made him humanity's most valuable asset. As battles raged across multiple star systems, he worked to find another way, a path that did not end in total destruction. The scar on his face burned with the memory of that first encounter, a reminder of how everything had begun, a symbol of the bridge between two very different ways of understanding existence. The galaxy held its breath. War was coming. But Jae-hoon Park was determined to change its course. The emergency communications center was silent. Screens showed multiple star systems burning with conflict. Jae-hoon Park and Korana stood side by side, an impossible alliance that could change everything. Humanity and the Kralshi had been on the brink of total war for months. Entire planetary systems had been destroyed, millions of lives lost. The conflict seemed impossible to stop, but they had found another way. Their shared history, the attack on Novus Prime, years of careful study, the complex relationship between predator and subject, had created something unexpected. Understanding, not just between two individuals, but between two entire species. We must show them another path, Korana said, her translator producing words that were both precise and emotional. Jae-hoon nodded. The scar on his face, a permanent reminder of their first encounter, seemed to pulse with significance. What had once been a mark of violence was now a symbol of potential communication. Their plan was complex but simple. They would expose the true nature of the conflict, not as a war of destruction, but as a massive misunderstanding. The Kralshi's research was not about conquest. It was about understanding the fundamental nature of intelligent life. Communication systems across multiple star systems began to activate. Encrypted channels opened. Information that had been hidden for decades started to flow. The truth was shocking. The Kralshi had been studying multiple species for generations. Their methods were extreme, but their ultimate goal was survival. Understanding how different intelligent life forms adapted, survived, and evolved was their primary mission. Jae-hoon used his human diplomatic skills. Korana used her species' advanced communication technologies. Together, they began to break down the walls of misunderstanding. Military leaders on both sides watched in disbelief. Footage showed Jae-hoon and Korana working together, a human and a Kralshi standing side by side, presenting evidence that challenged everything both species believed about each other. Their presentation revealed layers of misunderstanding that had built up over generations. The Kralshi were not conquerors. They were researchers. Their attacks were not about destruction, but about understanding. Each encounter was a carefully designed study of how different species responded to extreme stress. Humanity was not a target. They were subjects of the most complex research project in galactic history. As their presentation continued, something remarkable happened. Ships that had been preparing to destroy each other began to slow. Communication channels that had been filled with threats now carried curiosity. The scar on Jaehoon's face became a symbol of something more than violence. It was a bridge between two ways of understanding the universe. Kor-Ana's multiple sensory organs shifted in a gesture of shared purpose. They were no longer an alien and a human. They were partners, researchers, beings trying to prevent a conflict that could destroy everything. The galaxy held its breath. War was still possible. But for the first time, peace seemed closer than ever before. 20 years after the Great Galactic Conflict, history would remember this moment as the turning point for intelligent life in the universe. The Universal Research and Cooperation Center stood as a testament to what could be achieved when species chose understanding over conflict. Located on a neutral planet at the crossroads of multiple star systems, it represented something entirely new. Jaehoon Park, now a chief diplomatic researcher, stood on the central platform. The scar on his face, once a symbol of violence, now represented something more profound. A bridge between worlds. A reminder of how understanding could transform everything. Kor-Ana stood beside him. No longer just a representative of the Kralshi, but a partner in the most significant research project in galactic history. Their work had changed everything. The conflict that had threatened to destroy multiple civilizations had instead become the catalyst for a new way of understanding intelligent life. The Kralshi's research methods, once seen as aggressive, were now understood as a complex attempt to comprehend the nature of survival and adaptation. Multiple species now worked together. Where there had once been conflict, there was now collaboration. The Universal Research and Cooperation Center was more than a building. It was a living example of what could be achieved when different species chose to communicate instead of fight. Jaehoon reflected on the journey. From a scared child on Novus Prime to the person who had helped prevent a galactic war. The attack that had killed his parents had ultimately led to something greater than revenge. It had led to understanding. Our greatest strength, he often told new researchers, is not our ability to fight. It is our ability to understand. The center housed research from hundreds of different species. Each brought their unique perspective. Each contributed to a growing understanding of intelligent life in the universe. Kor-Ana's species had been transformed as well. No longer focused solely on research through conflict, they now collaborated openly. Their methods of understanding had evolved. Their approach to other species had fundamentally changed. Young researchers from multiple worlds walked the halls. Human, Kralshi, species that had once been enemies now worked side by side. The next generation was being taught a different way of seeing the universe. The scar on Jaehoon's face had faded over the years, but its significance remained, a permanent reminder of how a single moment could change everything. As the sun set on the research center, casting long shadows across halls filled with the most advanced technology in the known universe, Jaehoon and Kor-Ana looked out over the gathering of researchers. What had begun as a violent encounter on a distant colony had become something extraordinary. A new way of understanding, a bridge between worlds. Hope.